Good morning. Great day to be in the Villages. Thank you. Well, thanks so much. Appreciate seeing you all. We're here to sign the budget and tax package for the state of Florida. I'll say a little bit about that in a second. But first, I want to recognize a number of our elected officials. We have Senators Boyd, Bradley, Broder, and Truenow, and I want to thank them for all their hard work during this legislative session. From Orange County, Seminole County area, we've got Representative David Smith, and I appreciate all the hard work he had over this legislative session. And we also have our Agriculture Commissioner Wilton Simpson with us here today. I think it was true prior to me signing this budget, but I think signing the budget underscores the fact that Florida is the best fiscally managed state in these United States. So going into this legislative session, our current fiscal year, which ends tonight, we are actually spending less this year than we were the previous fiscal year. How many places are spending less year over year? Not a lot, and so we're currently in that, and we're building off that with this budget. If you look at the size of government in the state of Florida, so New York State right now has millions fewer residents than Florida does. And that wasn't true in the past. We used to be pretty similar even 5 or 6 years ago. Now we're about 23.5 million, and New York is about 19.5 million. And honestly, if they elect this guy mayor, it's going to decline even more from that. You know, I mean, we've paid, I'm going to talk about with this budget, we'll have paid off almost half of Florida's debt over 180 years just since I've been governor. But, you know, I could probably extinguish the other half if I just charge an entry tax from all the New Yorkers that are going to flee this guy, especially those rich people. So New York has millions of more people than we do in Florida, and yet their budget for the state of New York is over twice the size of the budget of the state of Florida. And yet, we do better services, we have better infrastructure, and we have higher performing education. Where is all that money going? A lot of it, quite frankly, goes to entrenched interests. New York City, just New York City alone, I think they have 8 million people. That budget is more than the state of Florida's entire budget of 23.5 million people. Our bureaucratic footprint in Florida is the smallest in the country. We have the lowest number of state workers per capita of any state in the United States of America. And so that's small government. And so, and then of course we have no income tax, which we'll keep that way. Thank you very much. You know, some of these states, if honestly, because, you know, there's very rare states that don't have a state income tax. I mean, we're one of them. New Hampshire's another one of them. Washington State, interestingly enough, is another one. Texas, so there's a handful. But, you know, we have regions of the country, like the Midwest, everyone has an income tax, and every time I talk to legislators from any of those states, whether it's Indiana, Ohio, I was like, just get rid of your income tax. And they're like, well, we have to do this. And I was like, no. If you're the only state in a region with no income tax, you'll have people flooding into your state. You will make up more tax revenue just by doing the normal taxes like sales tax and stuff that are already there than you would have to. And I think Florida is a good example of that. We've been able to have like booming revenues while we're cutting taxes and have no state income tax. So all this stuff can be done and be done meaningfully. And then also, so we have the lowest footprint in the country. We have the second lowest amount of per capita spending in the country. I think Texas is a little less than us, and who knows, maybe with their recent legislative session, maybe that's changed on the margin. We'll have to crunch those numbers. And then I mentioned with the debt repayment. Before I sign this budget, and we'll talk about what this budget will do, if you take Florida's 180-year history and you take the debt that's been accumulated, just since I've been governor, we've already retired over 41% of it, and then this budget is going to help us retire more at an accelerated basis. I launched a program called, that's an accelerated debt repayment program for Florida, and what it does is, these are debts that are already owed by the state. You know, there'll be bonds out there or whatnot. And we have guys in our bond finance department who will go in, they'll retire those a lot of times at a discount, which saves money on principal. But then if you retire it early, you're saving all the interest that you would end up accumulating. So all that we've retired has been many, many billions of dollars. You also add the many billions of dollars in interest that has been saved to you, the taxpayer, and I think we're the only state that has been that aggressive in retiring debt. And so of all the states that have a state debt, and some states are not allowed to have any debt, we have the lowest per capita in the United States of America of all 50 states. And so that's another thing to lead on. So we're doing that and doing that well, but we've actually done really big things on things that matter to Floridians. And so since I've been governor, we've provided billions of dollars to increase salaries for teachers. And so you now have ability to recruit teachers better, minimum salaries higher, more bonuses, more opportunities for that. And this budget builds off that. So that's something that wasn't being done until prior to me becoming governor. Now that's something that's really big. You also look at universal school choice. We have 500,000 kids that are on scholarships on our school choice program. We've got over 400,000 kids in charter schools. I know there's a good charter school nearby here in the Villages that has done very well, and we're proud of that. And then we also have embraced homeschooling. So we have the strongest homeschool population in the country. And so all of that has empowered parents so that whether you're super wealthy or whether you're poor, you have options as a parent to be able to put your child in the best possible learning environment, and that's taken a lot of hard work, a lot of investment. We're happy to have done that. We've also done really big on infrastructure and really big on roads and alleviating and got it enacted with the legislature a few years ago called Moving Florida Forward. We had projects that we knew needed to be done, especially in Central Florida. I-75, things in Champions Gate, I-4, all these things that were slated to be done, but a lot of them weren't even going to start till next decade. We did an infusion of cash because we were running big surplus, and so now those projects are underway. And many of them will be done 5 years ahead of schedule, 10 years. Some of those projects will be done 15 years ahead of schedule. That's what people want government to be doing, to be able to do things like that so you can get from point A to point B without it being, and even just the temporary lane we opened on I-4 a couple months ago. That's made a huge difference, and that's just one temporary lane. The final revisions are going to be much better. So we've been really big. We've done big on ports, which are an important state. We've done our spaceport. We've helped with infrastructure over at the Cape, and you have all these major companies that are booming over there. From Elon Musk does most of the launches with SpaceX, but you've got all the aerospace companies, you've got other competitors to SpaceX that are trying to gain a foothold. They've all been able to do that, and part of it is because we've provided the infrastructure that's necessary to support that. So we've done big on infrastructure while we're paying down debt, while we're being fiscally responsible. And then water quality and Everglades restoration, Florida Springs, Florida Everglades, massive amounts of support, huge numbers of projects that have been started or completed just in the last 5.5 years, and we've got more on the way. That's what people want. They want Florida to continue to be a great place to live and to work and to retire and to raise kids and to enjoy this great piece of land that God's given us. And then we've cut taxes by billions and billions of dollars. Now, when you don't have an income tax, it's harder for the state to cut taxes in as meaningful a way, but we've done, and I'll talk about what we're doing here this year, but we've done toll relief. We've done relief on taxes on different types of insurance policies. We've done back to school, disaster preparedness, you name it on down the line. We've done billions and billions of dollars. Now, what Florida needs to do, and it's not controlled by the state legislature, it's something that local governments control, but we need relief on property taxes, and that's what we're going to be working on. And it's going to require that that the legislature pass joint resolutions to put this question on the ballot for the people of the state of Florida. But it's my belief that to truly own your own home, that means you can't perpetually pay rent to the government. That's just not true private ownership. And so we're going to be working on that. I've spoken extensively with Ben Albritton, who's the president of Florida Senate, and I know he's very excited about it. I know the individual members in both the House and Senate are very excited about providing an opportunity to really do something historic and to really make Florida truly the free state of Florida. So we're going to be doing that. So that's kind of of where we are. You look at California running big deficits, Illinois insolvent, New York, obviously they've got a lot of problems always, and these are choices that you have to make as you're going forward. So the budget that I'll sign into law today continues the success that we've had in the state of Florida. I do budget recommendations at the beginning of the fiscal year or at the beginning of the legislative session, then the House and Senate work through their budgets, and then they produce a product. And this budget, they kind of play some games. There's kind of like here's the budget number, but then they put spending in the back of the bill. I think you just got to count both. So if you count all the spending that was proposed by me, all the spending that was actually enacted by the legislature, that was about a $600 million difference. They were $600 million above what I had proposed, but I mean, in a $117 billion budget, that's not a huge amount of daylight. I have line item veto authority, and so I have pared back that $600 million. So the final project that will land today is within $10 million of my recommendations that we had just a few months ago. And we have the second year in a row where this budget will spend less than current year's budget. So current year budget, which ends this evening, the spending less than the year before. When I sign this, next year we'll spend less than we've even done in this fiscal year. And so that's what you do if you want a sustainable future. We have a rainy day fund in the state of Florida. It's called the Budget Stabilization Fund, but it's a rainy day fund. And when I became governor until now, we've tripled the amount in our rainy day fund. In fact, when I sign this into law, with the amount that's going in, it constitutionally maxes out what we're allowed to put in the state's rainy day fund. So we can't do anything more than what we're done, which is good. I mean, look, you want a rainy day fund, but you want it to be reasonable. You don't want to have too much socked away because that means you're being overtaxed. And so I think the amount we have, I think it's good that it was topped out there. I think that will be able to get us through what we need. And look, I've said for many years, I became governor in 19. We had COVID the next year. We didn't know how that was going to shake out. I mean, we're a tourism state. How many folks were going to come? Obviously COVID was more damaging for elderly. So we didn't know with our senior population, how was that going to affect just normal life? And so we had made some tough decisions then to make sure that we could do. But of course, the fact that we were open, these other states weren't, we really took off. And we really boomed over those years. Now we're in a situation where you look macroeconomically, there's definitely some warning signs about the underlying health of the economy. And I've been saying this really now for probably like the last 9 months, particularly with a lot of the Biden policies that we had. I mean, we succeeded in spite of those policies, not because of those. I can tell you that right now. So I don't know what's going to happen, over the next couple years. If I did, I would start a hedge fund and I would be able to do very well. But I think we have to prepare that we could have slowdown, that there could be hiccups. I don't know what's going to happen with interest rates. I don't know what's going to happen with federal spending. There's just a lot of questions that can influence that. And so what I can say is that we're very well prepared to meet whatever is thrown our way. And that's really good planning, and that's responsible planning. And I could say, oh, you know, nothing's ever going to go. The reality is economies are cyclical by nature. They go up and they correct. And it's not because sometimes people make bad policy decisions that can cause it, but just the natural cycle, that's just the way it is. And we know that. And you see it in real estate, you see it in equities, you see it in different things. So we're well prepared to be able to meet whatever gets thrown our way. I mentioned the debt repayment. We started this program, and I want to thank Senator Albritton and the Senate that really embraced this. When this budget's in, with the amount that we're going to be able to dedicate to accelerate the debt repayment and save you a lot of money in the process, we will have retired almost 50% of Florida's total debt over a 180-year period just since I've been governor. That is really good. That's what we should be doing. The budget also includes $250 million on an annual basis to continue the momentum and continuing to really make a difference on that. If you look at the amount that you would owe, if you took the U.S. federal $37+ trillion debt and every American citizen had to pay an equal share to retire that debt, your share as an American citizen would be over $105,000 per citizen. If by some reason you needed to retire the Florida debt, the share for each Florida resident would be about $400. And so that's a much different scenario that we're looking at than Washington. And so I think that momentum will continue, and I'm really glad about that. On taxes, there's about $2 billion in tax cuts in this package that I'm going to sign alongside the budget. As I said, the property tax, at the end of the day, to be meaningful, really needs to go on the ballot because the state does not levy property taxes. That's done by your local governments, and that's how Florida's Constitution was designed. So that is, we're going to work very hard on that. Don't let any of these elected officials give you any excuses to why we can't do this. We can do it. And so you should make sure you're holding all of your reps and senators accountable to be on board with giving you a chance basically to vote because none of this can happen unless the Florida voters approve it next year. So that's kind of the big thing, the big enchilada that we're working on. But for this year, $2 billion. I think that's the second most Florida's ever done in tax relief in a given year. We did $2.5 billion a couple years ago. I think we did almost $2 billion in current year. One of the things we've done that the legislature's done, which I think was really smart, we do these back-to-school tax holidays. We do disaster prep tax holidays. And it's like they'll do, we're going to enact it this year and then this, and it's not permanently in law. And one of the things that happened was they didn't do the budget at the end of the regular session in May. It drug out another 45 days. Well, guess what? We normally have disaster preparedness starts when hurricane season, right before hurricane season starts in June. So they didn't have this done, so people didn't get to be able to get that. So both back to school and disaster prep are now permanent tax holidays in Florida. And so disaster prep, those items that have already been earmarked, you can buy them whenever you want. We're not going to limit it to certain dates. And then back to school, I think it's the entire month of August now is eligible for back to school. So all those back to school supplies, zero tax in the month of August. And that's a part of permanent Florida law now. So families don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about you be able to get those savings. Those savings are going to be there. The legislature has also done something that I've been asking for many years, and that's eliminating a tax that only Florida has of all 50 states, and that's taxing business rent. It's not good for our economy. It's not good for business growth. And so that tax is being sunsetted. And again, how many times do you hear of governments eliminating a tax? Like normally these taxes grow. So thanks for doing that. I think that that's well intended. And then thank you also for heeding my call to deliver a Second Amendment tax holiday. And so firearms, ammunition, accoutrement, as well as other outdoor items like fishing and bow hunting and things are going to be tax-free from September 8th until December 31st of this year. So you're going to be able to do very well. We've also been able to continue building on our success on teacher salary increases. This budget increases our pot for teacher pay increases by over $100 million, so it's close to $1.4 billion. We did $1.25 billion last year, and we got to continue to do more. But what we did, and I think we started this probably 4 or 5 years ago, people say, like, oh, we need more money for education. Well, then what happens is the state sends money to these school districts, and a lot of it gets eaten up by bureaucracy. And so the money it wasn't going to the classroom, like they weren't putting an emphasis on teacher pay. And so the money that we have a special item in the budget. The school districts can only use this $1.38 billion. They can only use it to increase teacher salaries. They can't use it for anything else. So this way, you're handcuffing them and making them do that. And that also applies to not just at our school districts, but also our charter school teachers. And so the Villages charter here, other charters that have done really, really well. And, consistent with that, we actually were able to get through on the budget. It didn't succeed during the regular session. We got an overhaul to our Schools of Hope program. So you're going to have groups, like there's a group in New York City, Success Academy, and they've been able to do very well in New York City, which is very tough because the unions want to kill charter schools up there and the elected officials are negative. They're going to be able to go in the most dire areas of Florida and open up these schools and potentially change people's lives for the better. And I know that was something that was potentially very meaningful that kind of fell off the radar at the end of the regular session, but I'm glad we were able to work with the legislature to get that through in this extended session. School funding, even though we're paying down debt, reducing spending overall, cutting taxes, this budget provides a record amount of funding in per pupil spending for our K through 12 schools. So that's showing, and I'm not one that says, oh, if you just spend more, you're going to do better, because I mean, some of the worst performing schools in this country, like Washington, D.C. and Chicago, have massive amounts of per pupil spending. I don't think a lot of that spending goes to actually help the pupils, but it goes, and a lot of it helps the school unions. So I'm not one saying end all be all, but I also think that, this does allow them to continue the momentum. I mean, for example, when I became governor, there was an emphasis on grading schools based on these high stakes end of year tests. And on the one hand, you got to have accountability, you got to measure progress, and if a school's doing well, they need to be told they're doing well, and you need to know they're an A school. If a school's failing, we need to know they're failing, and there needs to be remediation. But was one end of year test the best way to do it? So we replaced that high stakes testing model with something called progress monitoring. So they're smaller tests that take place over the course of a year, but then they have immediate feedback to the schools, the teachers, and to the parents. And if you think about it, you study for the test. I remember during COVID, it was like when COVID first came, they're like, well, there's no reason for these kids to be, people were telling me, no reason for the kids to be in school the rest of that 2020 year, because all they're going to do is spend a couple weeks studying for the end of year tests. And I'm like, well, you're teaching to the test. So is that really, progress monitoring is really testing the knowledge that you're accumulating. And if you take an end of year test and then you don't do well, you're on summer vacation by the time you get the results. So there's not going to be any real remediation. Now you're able to do it. We got the results that was, I think we put it out last week, or our Department of Education put it out. Really great results on progress monitoring, and you're seeing increased performance as a result of that. So that's really important, and we're going to measure success. We want to make sure we're holding people accountable. The other thing the budget does is it continues our emphasis on teaching American civics in our schools, particularly K through 12 schools. So we've emphasized this from the time I was governor, and I think what we've found is, one, there's certain things that do need to be taught. So you got to teach the Declaration, you got to teach the Federalist Papers, you got to teach the Federal Convention and the Bill of Rights and some of the stuff that's happened since then, all important, and then what led into the American Revolution, some of the ideas that the Founding Fathers relied upon, whether it was Enlightenment thinking, whether it was Judeo-Christian tradition, whether it was things like English common law, which is really big to them and is still something that underpins our legal system. You need to know all that. But in order to do that, you got to have teachers that understand this and that are well versed in it. And honestly, it's through no fault of a lot of you go to a lot of colleges now, they're not going to teach very much about the founding of this country. It's viewed as passé. It doesn't fulfill their ideological agenda, and so that's kind of that stuff falling out of favor. Now in Florida, we're pushing in the opposite direction. Our universities too, but the reality is you can go through a lot of universities in this country and not come out with a very good understanding of what it means to be an American or what are the foundations for this country. So we created the Civics Seal of Excellence program. We created a 50-hour course. Well, I mean, we didn't. We got scholars from like Hillsdale, Heritage Foundation, all these places, and they devised this programming, basically lectures about all these different things that went into the formation of the country and the values and principles that have made us a unique experiment. And if you go through that, you get a $3,000 bonus. And so you don't even have to be a civics teacher. If you're an English teacher, go through it. We think having this foundation is good no matter what you're doing. If you're doing U.S. history, all this stuff is important. So we've put through thousands and thousands of educators through this program. It's got like a 93% approval rate of people that have taken the course. It is worthwhile. It is meaningful. And that's Florida filling a gap where America's higher education system has really failed. And so I think that's instrumental, because the reality is, you can have this stuff presented and you can get a list that you have to read this or that. To have a teacher that is really knowledgeable and passionate about this and that can really bring it to life, that can light the fire in a student to all of a sudden, this is something they become passionate about. And I think what we're doing is really helping get us in that direction. And then also funding for a speech and debate initiative. I think like 5 or 6 years ago, we had like 8 school districts that were doing speech and debate. Now all 67 Florida school districts are doing speech and debate. We host the championship in Orlando. And if you think about it, the reason why you do speech and debate is not even as much about, I think it is good to be comfortable on your feet and being able to articulate things. But when you're doing speech and debate, you may be given a topic, and it may be a topic where you have to argue on the other side of what you actually believe. And so then you have to start looking at things and trying to see things from someone else's perspective. So you can argue about, I'm a big believer in term limits for members of Congress, for example, but if I was given that to argue against it, I'd have to kind of step out of my little, say, okay, what are the arguments against it? I don't think the arguments against it are great given how poor Congress performs, but there are arguments against it, and you've got to be able to wrestle with those. And one of the things that's happened, particularly in higher education, when you have the movement towards ideological conformity and indoctrination, I think what's happened, I think the Harvards and the Yales and those schools, I think they're producing graduates who I think probably have a lot of aptitude naturally, but these are people whose assumptions have never been challenged, because all they're doing is repeating the same basic party line. That is not how you sharpen your mind. You got to be in there and you have to see things from different perspectives. So I think having students be in a situation, they have to make arguments, they have to formulate that, I think is really, really important. And it's kind of become a lost art, but not here in the state of Florida. Our higher education system continues to be ranked #1 in the United States of America. I think it's like 8 years in a row we've been #1. We're proud of a lot of the reforms that we've done on there. For example, we were the first state in the country to eliminate DEI from our public university system. And we did that years ago when it wasn't fashionable to be against it. We took a lot of arrows for that, but we knew that it was fundamentally an ideologically corrupt concept, and it was being applied in ways that were really discriminating against people through no fault of their own. We also now have in Florida, because of reforms I worked with the legislature on a couple years ago, all tenured professors must undergo review every 5 years and can be let go for poor performance. And now part of that is that helps us recenter the universities on the pursuit of truth and preparing the students to be citizens of our republic. But it's also just from a practical perspective, if, when you get tenure, there's different ways you can go about it. I mean, that could be like a boost where you get into the research and the teaching and you're really productive. And we have faculty in Florida who are like that 100%. But it also, if you think you're bulletproof, then it causes just human nature, right? Don't really worry about research. Don't really worry about teaching. Kind of focus on whatever these other issues are that really aren't germane. Those types of professors that are not productive under the cloak of tenure, that's one of the most significant drains on a university financially, much less academically. So our university system has been able to filter out poor performers now. They're hiring people coming in. I mean, if you look at like the University of Florida, they have the Hamilton Center for Western Civilization, massive numbers of scholars who are actually well-versed in the Western tradition, who are actually gonna teach students and provide instruction in ways that reinforce, all that is special about Western civilization. And Hamilton Center at UF, if it's not already, within a couple years, it will be the premier center for the study of Western civilization in the world. And so that's something that's really meaningful. That would not have been done if we didn't have the overhaul of the faculty policies, because you can hire professors directly now. People would say, okay, why are all the professors thinking one way? Well, if you think the opposite of that, and you can only get hired if those other professors approve you, well, you're probably not going to get approved a lot of times, especially in kind of the liberal arts. So now, presidents of universities, the boards, they can bring in faculty and hire them directly. You got someone good at Georgetown, you can bring them in and they can be at Florida International or University of Florida. And that's been really revolutionary, and we're just seeing the benefits of that now, which I think is really, really good. So, and then New College in Sarasota. This college, I remember when I was governor, I think it was my first or second year, and the Speaker of the House at the time said, hey, I want to talk to you about New College. And I'm like, why do we need a new college? We have enough colleges already. I was like, I didn't even know, it had never come up. And he's like, no, it's in Sarasota. So I started researching more because, think about it. You'll run into someone all the time. Oh, I graduated from UF and I'm doing this. I graduated from USF. I'm doing all this. I just had never come across, and it had never been anything that had crossed my desk in the early days of me being governor. So I started looking at it. And in statute, it was supposed to be Florida's #1 honors college. In practice, it was like a Marxist commune, left of the left, no grades, more like a beatnik type culture, which, look, if that floats your boat, honestly, that's fine. I just don't want Florida taxpayers to be funding that. We got to do better from a taxpayer perspective. So I'm like, all right, I mean, and I think they were down to 400 and some students. And so, we made sweeping appointments to the Board of Trustees. They replaced the president with a conservative who had been the Commissioner of Education under our administration in the first term. And now all of a sudden, they're bringing in these professors that are really, really strong. And that is being transformed almost into our version of a Hillsdale College, where we're really focusing on core classical liberal arts. And there's just a lot of parents out there, they don't want to invest 18 years into instilling values, turn them over to some university that indoctrinates them in the opposite. That's not what they want. I think most parents want the students to have broad horizons and grapple with conflicting ideas, but you don't want an orthodoxy imposed. Well, now you look at New College, it's that's really what a liberal arts education is supposed to be. So we're doing that. Now, this budget continues something that I've stressed since the time I've been governor. So our Florida students, our Florida residents, have the same tuition today than they did the day I took office. Not 1 cent of increase on tuition in our universities. And not only that, We do have an ability, I know because the villages, this may be something that is of interest, where grandparents can qualify for in-state tuition for their grandkids, even if the grandkids went to school out of state. Now, you got to be a high performer and everything, but reality is that's something that's very meaningful. So the average tuition, if you're a Florida resident, for our universities is about $6,300 per year. Now, that is by far the lowest of any place in the United States of America, and our standards have gone up so much. You know, it used to be, you go to high school in Florida, you know, if you were a pretty good student, you get into wherever you wanted pretty much. Now, not so much. These are much more competitive, and so if you're good enough to get into some of these schools like UF and FSU, chances are you're qualifying for Bright Future scholarships, which is full tuition or 75% tuition depending on your marks. And so you really, even if you don't get Bright Futures, but especially if you get it, no debt. There's no need for you to go into debt to get a 4-year degree in the state of Florida. That's helping people. That's where people are going to be able to do well with themselves, not with a $100,000 millstone around their neck. I mentioned what we've done with environmental restoration, Everglades, water quality. At the beginning of my first term as governor, I said this needs to be a priority, that I'm calling for over that 4-year period, $2.5 billion in funding for those projects. And those projects there's a lot in Southern Florida, but they're really all over the state. And that's $1 billion more than had been done the previous 4. We not only did 2.5, we did 3.3 billion over those first 4 years. So then this term, I said, you know what? We're going to do even better. We're going to do 3.5 billion over the next 4 years. When I sign this budget in, this will include an additional $1.4 billion for Everglades restoration, water quality improvements around the state of Florida. That means already we far surpassed my $3.5 billion target. We're already at $4.6 billion, and we ain't done yet. So that's going to be very meaningful for a lot of people. We also mentioned the roads and infrastructure. This budget fully funds our Florida Department of Transportation work program. It fully funds the state of Florida's Moving Florida Forward initiative. So those accelerated projects will continue, and I think that's something that'll be meaningful for a lot of people. Finally, this budget heeds the call to support law enforcement throughout the state. So we launched a program a few years ago, you know, kind of in response to what was happening around the country with defund police and the attacks on law enforcement. We obviously don't do that in Florida. In fact, we signed legislation that prevents local governments from defunding police in the state of Florida. And we've done a lot of stuff, anti-riot legislation. You know, the media gets really upset because, you know, we clarified in law, you know, if you're at like a stop sign and an unruly mob comes and threatens you, you have the right to flee for your safety. Are you kidding me? And we've done a lot to have tough penalties against people who launch attacks on law enforcement, especially in those situations where, you know, you're demonstrating, which people have a right to do, but you got to follow the rules. You got to follow the law. And if you breach that line, we're not going to just sit there and allow the inmates to run the asylum. That's true for the state as a whole. The Hamas people tried to take over a road down in Miami after that whole thing was really starting a year or so ago, and they lasted 13 minutes on the road before they got escorted out. And quite frankly, at our universities, you know, you have a right to express yourself. You can have views. It's not our role to police your views, and some of these views that are more sympathetic to Hamas, I think, are quite frankly abhorrent, but you do have a right to those. But we also have a right to hold you accountable for your behavior. And if you're demonstrating in a way that is causing disorder, if you're threatening other students or faculty because they're Jewish or whatever reason, then you will be held accountable. They tried to, and we have done that. I mean, we've had students that got their degrees withheld because their conduct was outside, and that's true with demonstrations run amok. I mean, I know they tried to take over the campus lawn at Florida State, and the university turned on the sprinklers, and that was the end of that. And we would have done, we would have done more, whatever we needed to do to make that done. But it's also not only with the demonstration, but you'll have speakers come to campus. You go to like Stanford, and you'll have somebody that is not in lockstep with the left, and they're actually providing a different perspective, maybe even a conservative perspective. And you'll have some of these students just screaming and yelling and basically trying to do a heckler's veto, where you shout someone down so they can't even express their views. That doesn't fly in Florida. We will hold you accountable for that behavior. You can disagree with the speaker all you want, but you have to behave. And the same thing with these graduation ceremonies. You know, it's wrong for activist students to hijack graduation ceremonies and ruin it for everybody else. That's not speech, that's conduct. And you should be held accountable for that. So, all that being said is we're a law and order state across the board. We've already, when we launched this program, we saw what was happening in these other jurisdictions. And I'm just thinking to myself, would you want to be a police officer in like Seattle or Chicago and get treated that way? Of course not. So we launched a program where new recruits to Florida for law enforcement, municipal, county, and state agencies, they get a $5,000 bonus when they join the ranks. And that's been a huge boon for our recruiting efforts. And I can tell you, if this guy does get elected mayor of New York City, I'm going to have to set up a processing center to get all the NYPD who are going to want to move down to the state of Florida and work in our law enforcement. I mean, would you want to be a police officer for a mayor who wanted your agency abolished? I sure wouldn't. Would you want to be there saying no cash bail and that don't send in police to dangerous areas, send in social workers? I wouldn't want to be signed up for that. So you potentially, and I've already talked to the President Albritton, this is good, it's in the budget, but if this guy does get elected in November, I think you're going to see a potential to have a lot of folks want to come down in law enforcement, and maybe not even just NYPD, maybe some of the surrounding agencies too, because this stuff bleeds over. It's not like it's only going to respect the city lines. So that'll be a huge, huge problem. And you know, my thing on this guy is, obviously I disagree. He's a leftist, right? But it's like he's running on things that have already been tried and failed. And it's like, is this just Groundhog Day where we're going to continue to do dumb policies in our major cities and cause further decay? Because that's what happens. I mean, how many of you, are any of you from New York City or used to live in the area? Okay. You know, it was a great city when Giuliani was mayor, and even Bloomberg, even though I disagree with them on a lot, it was clean, it was safe, there was a lot going on. And I think de Blasio, I mean, really did a number on it. But I can tell you, whatever he did, this will be, I think, much, much worse. And it's like, okay, you have this idea of government's going to run the grocery stores. You know, that stuff has been tried throughout human history. It didn't work very well. Anytime it's been tried, it is not going to work there. You talk about saying we're not going to have law enforcement going in. Again, that's been tried. San Francisco tried to let the inmates run the asylum. It got so bad that they recalled a left-wing DA in San Francisco for being too liberal. Can you imagine that? That's how bad it got. And so this stuff it's something that will not work, but it does have an effect on the state of Florida, not just on law enforcement, but obviously everyone reaches their limit, right? I know in Chicago, you had a lot of people that reached their limit during COVID and during the BLM riots, but some thought that things could get better. Then they elect the current mayor, and that was it. So then people came to Naples or whatever. And I think this guy's election, I think, is going to change behavior. The reality is we have our bonus program. I think it's been very effective. I think almost every sheriff has utilized it. I know a lot of the municipal police departments have utilized it. I talk to these folks. You know, when I see them, I'm out and about, they'll come up to me. And I have not met one who regrets it. Now, you know, who knows of all the thousands, but the reality is I think it's been tremendously successful. So I want to thank everybody who was involved in supporting that in the legislature. And I also want to thank them for heeding my call to give a much needed pay raise for our state law enforcement agencies, Florida Highway Patrol, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, Fish and Wildlife, we have other law enforcement and some other agencies. You know, our Highway Patrol in particular, I don't think any agency has done more to help the federal government under the Trump administration on illegal immigration enforcement than Florida Highway Patrol. They round up illegals all the time and work with ICE. You know, if they were California, they'd be told you're not allowed to work with ICE. Here, you're required to work with ICE because we want to solve this problem once and for all. They also were the first ones that we sent when Biden opened the border back in 2021. We did send National Guard, but we sent state law enforcement officers down on the southern border to help Texas with that. And, you know, they did a lot of good, but the reality is people would get across, they'd catch them, turn them over to Border Patrol. Biden instructed Border Patrol to just release them into our country. So think about it. You come across the border, you get caught. The correct response is to send them back across the border, right? I mean, that's what you should do. Biden was saying, well, you can stay in the country. We'll give you a notice to appear. Just make sure you come back and appear 3 years from now. Yeah, that's not much of a deterrent. And I know those folks by and large, didn't show up. So our Highway Patrol has done a lot of heavy lifting on this really critical mission of ensuring that our country means something, that our laws mean something. That it's not just whoever decides they want to come is able to come, it's who we decide is able to come is allowed to come. And unless you enforce the law, we're never going to get that right. And so I'm really excited about the great work that they've done. There's more to come in terms of our working with the Trump administration on those very important immigration efforts. And the states, most states are doing nothing. The blue states are trying to sabotage. We're one of the few states that's, probably, we may even be the only state that's really full throttle saying, you know what, we're not going to solve this problem unless we are part of the team. And if we're not part of the team, the feds may do some good stuff, but they're not going to get the job done with the current resources that they have. And I know they're trying to build that up, and hopefully they do very quickly. But as it stands now, you need state and local to be there helping out. And we're the only state in the country that, so we banned sanctuary cities my first year as governor, which honestly should have been banned long before that. I don't know why we didn't do it, but we banned it. And then now we're the only state in the country, not only that's not a sanctuary state or banned sanctuary cities, but all state and local agencies have a duty to cooperate and work with ICE and DHS. And that's made a huge difference. Tom Homan's always pointing to Florida as an example, and I think you're going to continue to see that. So they deserve the pay increases. First of all, we need it just to recruit and to maintain people, and we got a lot of what we asked for on that. I think we'll come back more next year and ask for more, but all in all, law enforcement was supported. So I think what you see in the budget is an example of a very fiscally responsible state. We're meeting the needs of the state of Florida that I think most people want us to be focusing on. We're not, frittering it away on stuff. I did more than $500 million in line item vetoes. And, some of the stuff I don't think should have been in the budget for sure, but some of it wasn't bad, but I felt it was important to get the budget spending in line with my recommendations. And so front and back of bill is kind of the total spending. I think that came in about 9 or 10 million over my recommendation. So very close when you're talking about a budget of $117+ billion. So that's really good. Debt repayment, tax relief, reduced spending, but also support for education, support for law enforcement, support for natural resources, and all the things that you want to do. So I'm excited to be able to sign this here today. The work continues, but before I do that, we are going to bring up a couple of our speakers. And so we have Jim Boyd, who's going to be the next president of the Florida Senate, as well as our Agriculture Commissioner, Weldon Simpson. So Jimmy, you want to start us off?
Thank you, Governor. Don't we have the best governor in the country? There's a problem with this governor, though. As brilliant as he is, it's a really tough act to follow. Everything that I wanted to say, he has said far better than I can and articulate it very well, so I'll be very brief. We are led by a wonderful conservative governor, the cabinet represented today here by Commissioner Simpson, the legislature. We are so proud to be representing you all in Florida and doing what's right for Florida. I could go over the points the governor has made, but I don't need to do that because he's done them so very well. But just know this legislature will continue to fight for your freedom, to fight for your family's freedom, to fight for your children, your grandchildren, for your businesses, for the environment. We will always keep an eye on the environment because that's critical to Florida, and our law enforcement and our first responders. Without them, we would be nothing. So thank you, those of you that are in the room. We appreciate your service so very much. So on behalf of the Florida Senate, my friend and colleague, President Albritton, who couldn't be here today, Senators Broder, Trunow, and Bradley, who are here with us. It took us a while, the legislature, to get to this point, Governor, but we got there. I like to think of it as like a fine wine. It takes a little while for that to open up and develop, but we're here with your leadership and your steady hand. I think today, as the governor has outlined, we have a very good budget for Florida, less than last year, reducing spending, of course, reducing debt, putting away more money in a rainy day fund, doing everything that we would do as families to protect ourselves for the future, we're trying to do for the state of Florida. We will continue that under good conservative leadership, and we thank you for supporting those of us that do that. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Governor. And I'm going to talk a little more about the ag budget. But you know, we had a great year at the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. Many good things in policy that the governor's already signed, the Farm Bill, and we did many things at our department this year that I think are worth highlighting. First of all, we're building a new building in Tallahassee. So several of we've got 9 different buildings in Tallahassee today. The average age is probably 60 years old and in very bad shape, but we're going to bring many efficiencies to your Department of Agriculture. In the first 2 years, we eliminated about 150 FTE. And then we believe that over the next 5 years, we'll eliminate another couple hundred FTE, which is about 10% of all the employees at the Department of Agriculture. So we're going to help continue the efficiency of our department. When you think about our school kids, and the governor said it very well, we're very proud of what we did this year and the last few years with our FFA kids. FFA kids are the future farmers of America. 3 years ago, we started a grant program, and we said, you know, we really want to have all parents that want to participate, their children participate in agriculture, to be able to do so. We had 30,000 kids in FFA 3 years ago. Today, we have over 65,000 kids in FFA. Step 2 of that, the school boards would not allow those kids to have excused absences to go to their FFA or 4-H events out of school. So last year we passed a law that said you shall have an excused absence if it's a sanctioned event. So that now is in law. This year, step 3, you would think, well, maybe that's enough. This year we ran into zoning issues. So the school boards were saying, well, no, you can't build an agriculture facility at your school because we're not zoned properly. This year the bill was very clear. If you're an educational facility, you can build barns and such on your facilities to allow kids to raise their plants, pigs, steer projects, and things of that nature. So we're very proud of that, and thank you, Governor, and the legislature for signing that bill. This year, your Florida Forest Service will go to 2,500 fires throughout the state of Florida. In the last 2 years, we now have a fleet of helicopters, drones, to be able to respond immediately to these fires. You may not see a lot of this. We have record control burn, prescribed burn here in the state of Florida, and we're going to continue to do those things. We do not want to become California or the Midwest or Canada on these issues. We appreciate the legislature and the governor for giving us the equipment and tools we need to do our job with. Very proud of that. Our ag law has been beefed up. Our northern border security, our interdiction stations. Just recently, we worked with HSI and Border Patrol, had a major fuel theft bust here in Spring Hill, Florida. You can look it up. It's going to be a media release today. Over almost $50,000 was secured. We took down a major ring that was not only in the state of Florida, but around the country. So we're very proud of our ag law. We've got a great team there now. They're doing a great job keeping us safe in our state. Our Consumer Services Division this year has a Operation Safe Summer program. We've removed over 15,000 packages of illegal hemp in our stores just in the last week from this program. We're going to continue to do that. They're targeting our children with these programs. Last year we had an operation called Candy Crush. Nearly 1 million packages were taking off of our shelves, targeting our children. We appreciate the legislature and the governor for the help that they've given us on that program. The team's doing very well. This year, in the budget, we have many good nuggets that will really go unseen. One of them is a transfer switch program. So when we have a hurricane, you lose power. You can't turn power back on the fuel stations because we don't have generators. We've got a grant program this year to be able to put transfer stations within those gas stations so that we can hook a generator to it at the state level and get those fueling stations back up and running very quickly. So we're very proud of that. The governor did a great job speaking about our the water programs, and it's been true how good we're doing. In agriculture, we're doing an amazing job signing our farmers up for what we call BMPs, Best Management Practice Programs. And we have a cost share program just in the Indian River Lagoon alone. We've signed up over 20,000 acres in these last 2 years, more than double what had been there previously. So we're targeting areas of concern and including the whole state. But the cost share program the legislature provides and the governor signs has been amazing for what we've been able to do in agriculture. And this year we're also going to start doing our regional water projects, which is going to take up an additional amount of nutrient load throughout the state. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Florida citrus. President Albritton is from a little community called Wauchula, Florida, and been involved in the citrus business all of his life. I think he's the 4th generation, and over $100 million is in this budget to help your citrus farmers recover from citrus screening through research, through the craft program and replanting programs. We hope in the next 8 or 10 years you will see a lot of citrus farms back here in Central and South Florida, so we're working on that. Last thing I'll mention, this was a priority of mine during when I was Senate President, but one of my #1 priorities then was to identify and define the wildlife corridor. The wildlife corridor in this state, if you want to know what it is, you can Google it. There's a nice little map out there, but if you Google a map of the state of Florida at nighttime, everywhere it's dark on that map, you'll see all the beautiful lights. You'll see the beautiful lights here in this area of the state. You'll recognize everywhere it's dark on that map is a wildlife corridor. It's where our aquifer is recharged, it's where animals traverse the state, and it's where we grow your food. If our grandkids' grandkids are going to have a quality of life comparable to ours, we have to protect the wildlife corridor. In this budget, and thank you legislature and governor, we have $250 million for our rural and family lands program where we go in and buy development rights from farmers. And there's many advantages to buying development rights rather than buying at fee simple property. But we've had record funding. When I became Commissioner of Agriculture, there was about 56,000 acres in that program through the previous 20 years. Today we have over 230,000 acres in it, and certainly we'll have close to 500,000 in the next 2 years. So thank you, legislature. Thank you, governor. Thank you.
And just on the wildlife corridor, we've done amazing work there. There was a provision in the budget to take $200 million out of the wildlife corridor, put it in general revenue. That was not included in the $600 million I did veto that, so that remains in the wildlife corridor. It'll be subject to future appropriations, but I think we need to finish the job there. I think we've done really, really good. You know, it's like we have a beautiful state. Obviously, a lot of people want to be here, but you got to balance that with making sure that the state doesn't end up just concrete, right? I mean, you want to have that, and so I think it's been really good. And we'll continue working on that. So all in all, we continue the mission. I think things from a fiscal perspective, we couldn't be better positioned. We don't know what the future holds in terms of the macro economy or even the international economy. I know that there's a lot of different types of analysis that are out there about what is going to happen over the next 3, 6, 9 months, a year. But we're well positioned either way. So thanks to everybody. If you guys want to come up, we'll make this official. Does anybody have, I don't see any young kids with us here today, which I'm not surprised at. Does anyone have any young grandkids who would like a non-permanent marker to be able to give to them kids? You got it? Oh, that's a bad toss. That's a bad, who else? Oh no, sorry about that. Who else? That's a good toss. All right. All right, so those are, we would give the pens out, but the kids would write on them, and so the parents are like, can you do a non-permanent? I'm like, all right, so we got non-permanent. These are permanent, though. Today's the 30th of June, right at the buzzer.
Okay, no standing, please. We need to make sure you give us one. Thank you.
All right. So this budget will take effect at midnight tonight. Well, they're supposed to do it by May 2nd. We got it, I think the mid-June, kind of like, so we've had, there's a lot of line items in there that we've had to go over and kind of do everything, but we got it done, and so here's the Plains Land. All right, so we've got these pens. Anybody? Okay. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. All right. I also have, now these guys may not want these. These are veto pens. But actually, you know what? I need to borrow one of those pens to sign the tax package. I forgot to sign the tax package. Okay. So all you Second Amendment enthusiasts, September 8th till the 31st, no tax on any of the stuff. Ammo, accoutrements. That's really, really historic. And I know a lot of businesses will be happy with the rent going down. Okay, so we have that. All right, so here's the tax and the budget for 25-26 in the state of Florida. All right. Good job, guys. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Governor.
So we've got some red pens. So this is the veto pen. All right, who else? And there were, as vetoes go, I mean, I basically usually try to hit a target about, okay, what do we want the overall budget to look like? And then sometimes there's just a lot of stuff that you kind of have to veto, but this one we really wanted to get the total spending in line with my recommendations from February, and so I think it's 9 or 10 million more, so we got it pretty close. There's some things at the buzzer, but I thought all in all it was good. We did a little under 600 million, I think. We have done over $3 billion in the past. Now, on the veto, the $200 million for the take away from the wildlife corridor and put in general revenue, I vetoed that. We're not including that in the 600. I also vetoed, they took 750 and put it into some special fund where they're trying to do some constitutional amendment in the future, and it's there. I don't think that amendment's going to pass, so I vetoed the 750. So that's going back into the surplus as well. That's not included in the aggregate number that we gave you for line item vetoes. We also have legislation that's still pending. I think we're going through it. It's like I got all this dumped on my desk like 10 days ago. So we have I think a couple more days to be able to act on all the legislation. So there's a little bit left. We got through most of it. I may need some red pens on some of the legislation as well. Stay tuned. Okay, any questions? Yep. Yeah, no, so So, we've, I mentioned our efforts on illegal immigration, stepping up and really helping. And I think the one thing that we have seen over the initial months of the Trump administration is when we'd ask DHS, what can we do? They're just like, we just need detention space. Because, if you bring an illegal in, there is, the media says there is a process they go through, right, to determine whether you're in the country illegally. Some people may have a notice to appear in 7 days and from an immigration judge. Some people may already have an order of these. So there's stuff that go into it. And so, but that was the one thing. I've talked to Tom Homan about it. I've talked to a lot of these folks about it. And so we had a plan that we put out and told them them, hey, we can execute this. I think we probably put it out about a month or so ago through the Division of Emergency Management under our director, Kevin Guthrie, where we would be able to stand up some makeshift detention space very quickly around the state of Florida. And we were talking about other different possibilities. So DHS was very supportive. So, what we're doing is like the state is doing it. The feds are kind of overseeing and then reimbursing us for the costs. But, we're looking at, okay, where could you do it that's not going to disturb the community, not going to create problems? And, there just happens to be this Dade Collier Airport that's out there kind of in the middle of the Everglade area. And it's not defunct. People say there are training flights that go in there, but it's a massive runway. And, there's not a lot of buildings out there, but there's a lot of concrete. And so these guys set up this whole thing within a matter of days. And so when the president comes tomorrow, he's going to be able to see, you're going to be able to do. What'll happen is you bring people in there. They ain't going anywhere once they're there unless you want them to go somewhere, because good luck getting to civilization. So the security is amazing. But natural and otherwise. But what it can be, I think, is an effective way to increase the number of removals and deportations, which ultimately, if you don't do that, you're going to continue to have this problem of illegal immigration. So you'll be able to bring people in, they'll get processed, they have an order of removal, then they can be queued, and the federal government can fly right on the runway, right there. You literally drive them 2,000 feet, put them on a plane, and then they're gone. It's very logistically simple, but what we're also going to do is, this idea of immigration judge, these are not Article 3 judges. They're not federal judges like we think of. These are executive branch employees who are called immigration judges. So you can deputize different employees to do that. So we've offered some of our National Guardsmen to be able to serve as immigration judges. So what you could have is, okay, someone's a criminal alien, they obviously fast track. Someone has an order of deportation, okay, fast track. Someone may have just gotten picked up. They come, they can get like a notice to appear. Biden would tell you to come in 2 years. I mean, under the Trump administration, it's usually within, 14 to 30 days. But we can have our National Guard acting as immigration judges right on site. So you go, maybe you have a day or two, whatever, and then a decision's made. And then that's it. So this is potentially be a force multiplier as this goes. And so, I did speak with the president this weekend. He's very excited about doing it. But I think what he wants to see is, Florida should not be the only one in this fight, right? I mean, we literally are doing what the voters who elected all of us have been demanding for many, many years. And immigration was maybe the number one issue, maybe inflation, but certainly no worse than the second most important issue in the 2024 presidential election. So we've got to do it. And we're also looking at Camp Blanding up in Northeast Florida, which has a runway. And again, similar thing, secure, not going to interrupt the community, be able to fly people out. The feds will do it. I mean, we flew to Martha's Vineyard, right? I mean, we could probably fly there, but I think they want to be in charge of that because there's diplomatic niceties that go on, and I get it. So, but I do think that if you increase the amount of space for processing and then to be able to get them ripe to then be able to return to their home country by the thousands, that's going to really make a difference. And in Florida, we estimate we've got 50,000 illegal aliens in Florida who have already been ordered to be removed by an immigration judge. So you talk about, they've gone through this process, they have an order to remove, and they're just still here. And so that's low-hanging fruit. But we were in a situation where there's such a limited space that ICE has. Do you want all of our jails to be overflowing with illegals, or would you rather have that done in a separate mission? Because, unfortunately, we've got U.S. citizens committing crimes, and they are going to need to be held accountable. So it puts pressure on, it takes pressure off of our local institutions in a way that I think will be very, very efficient. So it should be, I think people are impressed. I think a lot of people didn't even know there was an airport there. I mean, but there is there. I mean, it's a good facility. Things are being done in, I think, a very efficient fashion. And I was really, honestly, I was impressed, but I know dealing with the hurricane response and all the other, monoclonal antibodies during COVID. We would set up monoclonal antibody clinics on 24-hour notice. Hey, we need one in Jacksonville. 24 hours later, it's up. That's this emergency response apparatus that we have. So I think it'll be interesting to see. And I believe by tomorrow they will be open. So DHS approved us doing this last week, and I think by tomorrow it'll be ready for business. Yes. That's his plan.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for that. Walk us through, if you can pull back the curtain and walk us through the process of how Florida is able to make this stuff happen so fast. I recall the bridge, remember after a hurricane 3 years ago, and people in other parts of the U.S. were in awe of how we made that happen. So fast forward, whether people like it or not, how is this process able to happen? Just walk us through the steps.
It's just leadership and execution. We are a state that really understands when you're a skinny, you're a peninsula sticking out in the middle of a tropical part of the world, you are going to have to deal with weather disasters. Now, we've had our share in the last however many years. Maybe we get a break this year, but we're prepared. And so you have that. You've also seen that put into place to head off the BLM riots back in 2020. You didn't see that happening here because we had response. Even when spring break in Miami Beach, we had to send people in and get that in order. The monoclonal antibody, we used emergency response. There were obviously physicians and nurses on site, but the logistics of it was all through that. So we have wherewithal to be able to do things and do things quickly. What I told when I first became governor, I said, all right, we got to look to see what's happened well, what hasn't happened well, and different things. And a lot of people were frustrated with the power response in terms of being without power for 3 weeks or something. And so we launched our initiative to pre-stage the linemen. So it's a similar thing, honestly. It's not a detention facility, but we will set up camps where these folks are able to be there, ride out the storm, and then immediately go in and start reconnecting the power. So we just did Hurricane Milton. There were 4.2 million restorations in record time, and 99% of that was within a matter of days. The majority of that was within 24 hours. Usually in the past, folks weren't even on site working for another 72 hours, right? So we've done that. So it's a similar thing. We had set out the plans to DHS. This is something they wanted to approve. And we knew we'd get the reimbursement, and we're doing it actually at a rate that's cheaper than what I think they anticipated. And so you do it and you make it happen. That's just how we roll in Florida. It's important, but the directive I gave was, okay, let's see what we can do better, but by all means, do not get ground down in bureaucracy. Do not get ground down in red tape. We know what the policy is. You obviously, there's certain things you have to check, obviously, but just get it done and stop acting like don't pass the buck, just do it. So that's what we do. And I think it's been something that we have great response. We work very quickly. Those are just the expectations.
I'm not trying to make light of any of this, but when it comes to the facilities to make sure that sewage is being treated properly, I know some protesters.
No. It's all self-contained. So they will be transporting out the wastewater to facilities. There's going to be zero impact on the surrounding area. They're going above and beyond on that. They do that as a matter of course anyways. If we were doing a hurricane response in Fort Myers Beach, you're very sensitive about that. So it isn't any different, but I think people think that somehow we just decided to build an airport out of whole cloth. No, that was there, right? It's a bunch of concrete They're utilizing that, but it's interesting because they're utilizing the existing concrete footprint, even on the interior of the airport where there's grass, they're staying off that grass. It's just grass, guys. It isn't anything, but that's what they were doing. So yes, so that'll all be self-contained. They're going to go to extraordinary lengths to ensure that. And obviously, you know, I've invested how much billions and billions of dollars into increasing and improving the hydrology of the Everglades. If I thought somehow this was not going to hurt that, then I wouldn't do it. I mean, I think this is the most efficient and effective place to do it. No, the Florida residents are not going to know that you know, that this stuff's not going to impinge on them. Whereas if you put it in a more populated area, it might. This facility just happened to be there, so we'll do. But they've got a really strong management plan. And then some people ask, like, well, what if there's a hurricane? Like, you think they didn't think of that? Of course they do. Anytime you would do anything in Florida, you'd have to think about, you know, what's going to be resistant at what. Now, this is more interior, and so the winds that you would get would likely not be as strong as what a major hurricane would bring right on the coast, but it still could potentially be significant. And so, of course, that they have plans and contingencies for all of that. So yes, that'll be done, and we would not have agreed to do it at that site if I thought that somehow it was going to negatively impact all the great work we've done on improving and restoring the Everglades. In fact, you know, we're going to be opening up the C-43 reservoir here in a couple of weeks. Massive, monumental achievement to be able to have gotten that done. And so the progress has been fantastic. Yes. They let you. You're out in the wild, out of Tallahassee. He's at Tallahassee. He came all the way to the Villages to do the budget press conference. Thank you for doing that. So look, on the property tax, we need to do property tax. It's going to require us to go to the ballot and get it done. I know, I spoke with President Albritton yesterday about it. He's committed to do it. There's no excuses. In the House of Representatives, we have almost a 3-to-1 Republican majority. Is there any possible excuse for why you can't get it done? In the Florida Senate, we have more than a 2-to-1 majority, and so we will get that done one way or another. It's going to be a very significant issue for the balance of this year and into next year. Now, there was actually a provision they put in the tax for $1 million to this bureaucracy in Tallahassee called EDR. I mean, it's kind of like a state version of like the Congressional Budget Office. I've been very nonplussed by their analysis, so I vetoed that because we don't need to give a bureaucracy money to study this. We know what needs to be done, so let's just do it, and we will do it. Now, when you're looking at the budget, I mean, look, I think that the session was unnecessarily bumpy. It's one thing if you're clashing on principle, and I stand on principle. You know, we've had disagreements amongst Senate, House in the past, and you kind of just work through those. You know, there's some times where there's things that I have to really push for, that I get internal resistance. Most of those things, once they're enacted, everyone campaigns on them, but that's beside the point. And there's sometimes when it rises to the level of having an actual confrontation. I mean, I had to veto the redistricting maps a couple years ago, call a special session, and then we did maps that, you know, I think are more consistent with the law and Constitution. And so we did that. This one, I think, was more driven by personal agendas, by kind of vendettas. I think it got really nasty between the House and Senate leadership. And I would just say most of what we have here was really a result of, you know, a lot of the Senate working with our office to be able to land the plane in a way that I think the people of Florida respect. You know, this House of Representatives, the way it does is like, you know, you have the leadership and they tell you vote this way, vote that way, and they punish you if you don't vote the way they did. So, for example, you know, when I did the immigration, so literally we have the President of the United States coming down tomorrow to tout what Florida's done. But, you know, when I called the special session at the beginning of the year to say state and local must support, you know, the Speaker of the House opposed that and tried to jam a bill in that would have eliminated all of my authority to enforce immigration laws. Why would you do that? Well, it was an amnesty bill, basically. But that wasn't driven. That was driven by a different agenda. That's not your agenda, right? And so, you know, you saw a movement in the House of Representatives in Florida to kneecap our ability to have anti-woke higher education standards and to make sure that our universities are educating, not indoctrinating. People are looking to Florida for leadership on those issues. I mean, heck, even the New York Times has said, you know, if you want to see what the Trump administration is trying to do, just look to Florida and look at all the stuff they've done. Now, they disapprove of what we've done, but they are acknowledging what we've done has been very meaningful. Why would you want to peel that back? No, nobody. And then we did a lot of tort reform, which has helped make, you know, it's helped on costs because we were the #1 litigation state in the country. And so that was hard fought. And then they tried in the House to repeal a lot of that. And here's the thing. You don't have to agree with me. If they run and seek your vote on a certain agenda and then they implement it, you know, if I don't like it, you know, I can veto it, we can tussle, whatever. But that's not what happened here. These guys all ran on the agenda of Florida that's been so successful, that people around the country want to emulate in their states. They got elected on that pretense, and then because of the leadership in the House, they pursued an agenda that was foreign to what they told the voters when they got elected in 22, 24. And some of these House members would not have been elected if it wasn't for me in 2022. That was really what turned Florida from a swing state into a red state. And we're happy with that. You know, but the reality is what's your agenda? And I think a lot of the agenda was not an agenda that the voters sent them there to do. And so I think the way it went 45 days, it didn't need to go 45 days. This could have been done 45 days earlier. I could have signed this budget a month ago and have substantially similar things. So I think what the House leadership did, I don't think it was successful. I don't think any of the gambits they did from trying to neuter us on immigration enforcement and try to promote amnesty, that failed. I think it failed to try to kneecap us on higher education reform. I think it failed to try to undo tort reform and on down the line. And so, you know, we are where we are with this, but I think the budget reflects the hard work that a lot of the senators put in to getting this to where I think the people of Florida wanted to see. You know, I'm having to fight for a Second Amendment holiday. Like, these guys all run on saying Second Amendment, and yet you're getting pushback on Second Amendment tax holiday? I mean, give me a break. So, you know, that's just kind of how the cookie crumbles on this. But I think if you look at, okay, we're in a good spot. We got what the state needed. You know, we got a good product. I think my vetoes that I did, I think were appropriate. I think the level that we got the budget back down to is similar to what I recommended, which is good. The debt repayment, and look, that was really driven by the Senate. I mean, they embraced our vision for debt repayment. I appreciate that. Topping off the rainy day fund. I know both chambers supported that. I think it's great. But you know, we are where we are. But let's just be clear, you would not want to rerun that movie script, you know, if you're the leadership in the Florida House of Representatives. It did not work. You did not have a mandate to do that. And so I think it'd be better, you know, to not constantly be at war with the Senate, not constantly be at war with the governor, but actually do what the voters sent you there to do. And that's what we want. The Constitution, right? I mean, so what we're going to do is, as I said, look, if you're a snowbird or you have investment properties or commercial, you know, that, I mean, look, ideally, like, but where can we really make a difference? And I think it's on Floridians' primary homesteaded properties. I do not think you should have to pay just for the privilege of living into a house you already own. Now, we've run numbers on this stuff. We're going to do a lot of work over the next couple of months, and so, but ultimately, you're going to need to draft a joint resolution, and both houses are going to have to pass it, and then the voters are going to have to approve it by 60%. So there's a lot of hurdles here, but I think that is really where we should focus on. Are there things where you can say, well, you don't get funding if you do that? Maybe, but I don't know that that would be sustainable or ultimately be as effective as we need to do. There's also limitations on how they can work with the millage rates and everything like that. I'm not sure that they are able under current Constitution to say, homesteaded property, you have no property tax, but then you have more. I mean, I don't know, maybe, but I think the people have said there's a question. So you put something on the ballot, that will settle it once and for all. But we started running numbers, and I think some people say, well, if you lose, if primary homeowners, homesteaded Floridians aren't paying taxes on their homes, then how are you going to fund this or that? And like, what about these rural areas? So we've got 31 fiscally constrained counties, mostly rural. We've run the numbers. If we just wanted to backfill that lost revenue from the state, it's like $300 million a year. That's nothing. That would be easy to do. But I also think these local government budgets are bloated. They have grown a lot. Why? Because real estate values have gone up. People's property gets assessed higher and higher. And then you got to all of a sudden have a more significant tax bill. And I would have used that revenue to cut taxes and to let people keep more. I think a lot of our local governments used it to spend. So a lot of them have seen really significant budget increases. So if you just were to right size the budgets, and yes, do public safety, do all those, that gets you a long way there. But I think there's other things that those locals will be able to do. But man, imagine if you knew that your personal house, homesteaded in the state of Florida, means that you own it free and clear, and you're not having to constantly pony. I mean, that would really be, it's doable. And so we're going to be working through that to show everybody that it's something that's doable and that's something that's useful to do. But I think it's got to go on the ballot. I don't think that legislatively, with the constraints that the legislature faces under the current arrangement, I don't think it would be done that would be really, really effective.
CFO, lieutenant governor positions, I see some high-profile Republicans that are from the Central Florida area that were up there on stage with you. Any names?
So what I said, I said this kind of at the beginning of the legislative session. I was like, I'm going to get through the legislative session before I make those appointments. Now, I did think that legislative session would have ended earlier than it did, but now that we've brought this, I do have some bills to consider that are outstanding, and I will do that. But that obviously will be something that will be next on our agenda once we clear the decks from this, both in a lieutenant governor and a chief financial officer. So I would say that those decisions have not been made, I would say, first of all. But second of all, I will say that those will be in relatively short order, probably not before July 4th, because people are not going to be paying attention. But when we get back on there, that'll be something that we're going to do. Yes, sir. I did knock on wood.
Are you concerned with cuts to NOAA and the National Hurricane Center from the federal side, and the fact that our emergency management director is really focused on immigration? Are we ready for potential hurricanes?
Well, those are two different things. On the federal side, that's going to be up to them. So I can't answer that question in terms of what the impacts will be or not. We've worked well with National Hurricane Center. Our emergency management director is not focused only on immigration. In fact, to the contrary, we're constantly reevaluating what did we do in the previous cycle, how can we do going forward, and learning. And I would say that, certainly during my tenure, I don't think there's ever been a state that's responded to national disasters more robustly and effectively than the state of Florida. I mean, you mentioned that, we had a bridge knocked out in Pine Island in Southwest Florida after Ian. People were running around like chickens with their heads cut off. Finally, they came to me. It wasn't a state bridge. They say, hey, can you help us with this? And, look, a lot of people in my shoes would be like, well, if you help, then you own it. So if it doesn't go well, they'll blame you. So a lot of people would just say, hey, it's your, but I said, no, we'll do it. So, I said, these guys don't have 6 months to wait for this bridge. And so we took it, we looked at it, we acted, and we rebuilt it in 3 days. So, this stuff can happen. You just got to do it. But we will be ready. A lot of the folks that are involved in this immigration mission. Some of those vendors do a variety of things. It's not going to do that. The storms are our first priority when we're doing this. But we did the monoclonal antibody sites back in 21 all around the state in the middle of hurricane season. I mean, that was in August and September of 2021, and we were able to do that. And then, fortunately, we didn't have any major hurricanes that year, but we were able to respond. So we'll be ready to respond. And I think if you look at, go back to like 6 or 7 years ago, and look at power restoration, and then look how far that's come. And it's not just the investor-owned utilities like Florida Power and Light, which, they're a behemoth, right? They've got a lot of resources. Our rural co-ops were some of the fastest restorations after Milton of any outfit. And so you've seen great improvements in the rural cooperatives. It used to be if a hurricane came, you'd be like, well, man, I hope it's like FPL or one of those, because they people know they've got resources to get after it. And if you have a co-op, people are like, oh man, it's going to take longer. And that was true initially, but now, they've really done a good job. And so they're doing well there. Now, I do think there is a question about what role is the federal government going to play going forward, particularly post-storm. We handle the prep. We handle the initial response. Yeah, we'll have Coast Guard. We'll have some kind of federal assistance on the periphery, but it's mostly locally executed, state managed and directed, and then the feds come in and can reimburse us. But what will happen is if we do have a major event, what's the threshold going to be where they will approve us for financial assistance? If it's a major, then a lot of times you're going to reach that threshold. If it's like a category 2, does it reach the new thresholds? I think they've raised the threshold. So I think that's a question. I also think the question is okay, are you devolving stuff to the state? If so, devolve it. I'm happy to block grant me money if we have a hurricane, and then we'll administer that far more effectively than the federal government. We have not necessarily gotten anything that would give us any directive on that. So I do think if there's a storm that happens, I know FEMA's kind of in transition, what's that going to mean? Because there are existing programs for individual assistance and reimbursement of local governments, and if that's going to be devolved to the states, are you going to give us block grants, or we'll be able to manage that ourselves? Or are you going to say, you guys just figure it out? Now, if they say just figure it out, that is going to cause us to have to change some of the priorities that we've had. Now, fortunately, we've got a big surplus and we have a lot of money socked away. We'd probably be able to handle it, but I don't know that we would necessarily adopt the same programs that the federal government has adopted. So I think that post-storm, how that will work, what FEMA's role will that be, I do think that's somewhat in flux. And, honestly, it may be something that I talk to the president about tomorrow. All right, thanks, everybody. God bless you. You take care.